Hello, and welcome to our History Hour podcast. This is Evan, Kris, and Kaleb, your hosts.
Hi.
Hello.
We are all members of the University of Maine Presque Isle History Club, and we are broadcasting from the WUPI 92.1 FM in Presque Isle. This is the show for all the curious and those attracted by history and fascinating stories. And on this episode of our podcast series, we will be discussing the history of zombies in American culture. With us today, we also have a special guest, Kimberly Sebold, history professor here at the University of Maine Presque Isle. Welcome, Kim.
Hello.
So, to start the podcast, let's begin. So, we decided to talk about the zombies, right? So, let's begin by talking about what is the beginning of the history. Like, how did we come with this idea of a zombie? What is a zombie? Let's start with that first. And then we'll try to develop a storyline that will describe everything of the history of the zombies in American culture, because from what I know so far and from what I met with Kim and you guys, there is a long history and there is a lot of stuff happening when we talk about zombies in American culture. So I guess I'll start with Kim. I mean, can you give us a little bit of a background of how it started and what it is now? Like, how did this whole zombie thing started?
So, do you want to define what a zombie is first?
Let's start with that, yes.
Yes. So, I'm going to throw it back to you guys.
And you guys can help, yes.
There's one characteristic that all zombies have.
Mindless?
I'm going to guess dead.
They're green?
They're green.
I've seen in the movies.
Green?
They're green.
So,
Really?
so let's go with Chris's mindless. If you're mindless, what do you lack?
Intelligent form of thinking.
Ability to think, yeah. I'll guess so.
A lack of sapience or saying, I like green, identity.
Identity. Okay. So,
Consciousness.
huh?
Consciousness.
Consciousness. All right, but that's still not the word. It's a two-word characteristic.
Mind controlled?
Okay, who's doing the mind control?
I'm going to guess some sort of shaman or...
And so if somebody is controlling your mind, what do you lack?
Thinking. Right? Are you guys okay?
Two words. Two words. The first begins
It's on
with
the
an
tip of
F.
my tongue.
The first begins with an F.
Function.
No. Two words. The second begins with a W.
We are in a
Help
conundrum
us.
here.
Help us, Kim, please.
Free
You're the expert
will.
here.
Free will, yes.
I'm an
Yes.
idiot.
No.
So
you're
am
not.
I.
All zombies lack free will. Whether it's a shaman or a voodoo priest or a bokor or a parasite in your brain forcing you to do these things, you don't have any control.
That's a good
So
point.
you lack free will. So that's one thing that
Or
all
finals.
yeah. That's one thing that all zombies have in common is this lack of free will.
And we see them portrayed. I mean, that's the main concept of it. There's a creature, because I don't want to call it a human. Because in most of the movies and the pop culture thing, it's this human that deceased, and then it just comes into life again with no free will.
Right. Right. So, go ahead.
So you mentioned, when I mentioned dead earlier as both half joke and actual answer, are not all zombies considered dead in history?
Well,
Or undead?
no, so first of all, you have to go back to understanding voodoo and where voodoo comes from. So, if you want me to give you some history, just
Please do, yeah. So I guess we'll start with the first step, which is voodoo. I guess that's where we starting with, because I guess that's the history of
Right.
it. It starts with voodoo.
Right. So, voodoo, if you go back to Africa today, Benin, the country of Benin, is where you might find voodoo originating. So so you have to go in and look at slavery. So a lot of slaves were coming from the west coast of Africa, one of those being Benin, which is where they trace the roots back of voodoo. So I can go into a whole thing about
Please do, yes.
American slavery versus Haitian slavery, because you have to understand, I think, a little bit of that first. So American slavery and Haitian slavery are different. I mean, there are bringing slaves over from West Africa, but American slavery, even though it's brutal, it's not, I don't want to say it's not as brutal, because that kind of dismisses the brutality of it no matter where you are. But American slaves actually lived, and they actually lived and reproduced. All right? And the other part of that is that when they finally are allowed to become Christians, which isn't until the Great Awakening later in the 1700s, it's Protestant Christianity, not Catholicism. So that's kind of an important thing to remember. Slaves in Haiti worked in the sugarcane plantations, and their average lifespan was about 25 years. So they didn't reproduce. And what would happen is they just had to keep bringing more slaves over from West Africa to get their supply of workers, is what they had to do. So the point to all of this is that African religion is much more present in Haiti. Not that it disappears in the United States, but it's by, it's the beginning of the 1800s, we no longer have the slave trade, the outside slave trade. And basically, I would say that American slaves are blending their culture with American white culture to some extent. And then Christianity will come in as well through Protestantism. But Haiti, that idea of what that religion was about, and it didn't get corrupted as much because those slaves keep coming over and keep coming over and keep coming over.
So it keeps the tradition alive, basically.
Yeah, it does. It does.
They're not assimilated. Yeah.
And this kind of resulted in things like New Orleanian voodoo.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
So the one thing that New Orleans and Haiti have in common is that they were both French colonies. Although New Orleans switches over to Spanish and then goes back to French and then eventually becomes part of the United States. So it's kind of got a little bit of French and Spanish culture in it. But let's go back to Haiti for a minute. So there's like 4 different groups in Haiti. The wealthy white plantation owners, the free people of color. Now that would be somebody whose father was most likely white and mother was a slave, but because they are children of white plantation owners, they are freed. And so they actually have status in society.
I was about to say, so do they treat the children of white plantation owners differently than the other Haitian people?
Yes. Because, I mean, most of Haiti is wiped out. But the indigenous people are wiped out by disease and everything like that. But in the United States, that's not the case, because in the United States, if you were a person of mixed background, your status followed the status of your mother. Whereas this is kind of following the status of your white father, and you're freed, and you too could own slaves. You too could become a plantation owner. It doesn't mean that they had the same status as whites, because they still have color, but they're there. And then underneath of them comes poor whites. So if you can imagine being a poor white in Haiti and having a person of color above you, in the social status, that kind of ticks
Kind of
people
just
off.
freak out, kind of like,
Yeah.
oh, how dare these people
Yeah.
be.
But then 90% of the population on Haiti were slaves, and that's the last tier of that society. Yeah. So so just kind of keep that in mind. I mean, the poor whites are kind of mad because the free people of color have a little bit better social status than they are. The people of color, the free people of color, are kind of mad because they don't have the same status as the white plantation owners, and of course the slaves are just, yeah. So so this is all building up. Yeah, this is all building up to 1789 and the French Revolution and the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, and they the free people of color and the poor whites clutch on to that idea that they have equality in the social status because it's a French colony, right? Anyway, to make the long story short, the other aspect of this too is that there is what are called maroon societies, which are escaped slaves going up into the mountains and kind of living on their own. And that's where the voodoo really gets started. I mean, so some of these guys are fresh off the boat. Like you said before, the ideas are still alive there, and so some of them are going off to do that. Now, what all of this comes about is that with the French Revolution, these people think that, the second and third group in society think that they should be equals. And eventually, some rumors are that the slaves are to be freed. It all ends up in the first major slave revolt in the Americas. And now this revolution goes on for quite a while. So it starts in 1791, and I don't know. I think it's like 18. It carries on for at least 5 or 6 years. I'm not positive.
You said that so the voodoo starts with those escaped slaves in the mountains.
Well, they all are practicing some form of voodoo, but those guys who are escaped are more free to practice it as they want.
So it's like the religion in a sense.
It is their religion.
It is.
It is a religion, yes. And the Catholic Church, because it's a French colony, the Catholic Church is there too, and the slaves are supposed to become Catholic.
Yeah.
So eventually you'll get a mixing of that Benin religion, that voodoo, and Catholicism as time goes on. And some of the gods, the voodoo gods, become some of the saints, the Christian saints, which is not uncommon. But the slaves and their revolt, it really gets started in one of those maroon societies. And they use voodoo to kind of unite all of the slaves together to rebel. And I'm not going to go more into the Haitian Revolution because you don't.
We need
really,
a full podcast for
yeah,
that.
That's another full podcast.
That is. But the thing is that because it was the first government to be run by people that were descended from Africans. Maybe some of them still were because it was really like the United States was scared out of because this was a slave revolt, and if it can happen here, it can happen. If it can happen there, it can happen here. So people other governments weren't quick to recognize Haiti. And so you have some turnover in the government, and eventually the government decides to try and suppress voodoo because they want to look like they're a civilized nation, and they want to get the respect of the white nations that are around them. So they kind of push voodoo underground. All right.
Because it doesn't really look that civilized.
No, it does not look that
No.
No, it doesn't look. So it goes underground. Now, where do zombies come out of all of this? So one of the
ground.
things, and this is we're getting back to your dead.
Ha
I was supposed to say I found something. I found like some things like where the word zombie comes from. The words I found this on I forgot what site. The word zombie most likely derives from the West African Kimbundiu. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Bundu, I think.
Word Nzambi, Nzambi, the name for a snake god or any divine spirit. It later came to mean reenact a corpse, a rise again corpse
Yeah.
in the voodoo tradition.
So that's where. So like with every religion, there's the good aspects and the bad aspects, right? And there were people who wielded power within the voodoo religion called Bokors, and they were people that the spirits came to them much better, but they could also use it for evil. And that's where zombies come into play, because they could supposedly reanimate a corpse and then get that corpse, and this is some of the stories that come out of that. They could get that corpse then to go work on the sugar plantations and collect their pay.
Oh, wow.
It was also a way of scaring people. So there's this idea that the zombies were dead and then they were reanimated corpses. But getting back to what you're asking me, years later in the 80s, there's an anthropologist by the name of Wade Davis. And really, I don't think they're killing. It's not a reanimated corpse. What it is they've given them some kind of a extreme sedative that makes them appear dead, and they bury them. The process of being buried alive, if you come to in that coffin, kind of makes you mindless to begin with. Then the guy would dig you back up, and then he kind of had, your mind was kind of blown at that point, and he had control over you.
Like in shock or
So-
something from being buried alive.
Yeah.
So
So that's like one of the most traumatic ways to get whatever. Yeah. Dead. And die, yeah.
So those
No thanks.
shamans will take live people and do this whole process?
They could, yes.
Oh,
they
wow.
would do of course, the people would have thought that they were dead, and that's where it comes back to the idea that they were reanimated corpses, when reality, this Wade Davis, I think he actually goes to Haiti and studies this because he's a botano-anthropologist, and he's hired by some big pharmaceutical companies to go find out what it is that's caused that they used to make zombies, so that they could then use it in operations and stuff like that. And the closest he comes to it is he thinks it's something having to do with the puffer fish, but again, that's I don't think he ever really defined what the formula or the solution was that caused these people to be reanimated, or to seem to be dead and then reanimated. So there's several. Something I should say is 1883, Haiti passes a law that makes it illegal to create a zombie.
Oh, so it was official.
It was official, yes.
So it was a recognized practice.
It was a recognized practice.
Wow.
Yes. So, and I don't know, I don't know how big it was or anything like that, but if they're making a law about it, then it's got to there's got to be some meaning to it, right? Some reality to it.
Yeah.
So keep in mind that voodoo is basically been suppressed. Now, let me just say this too. Now, the French slaves that are in New Orleans are bringing their ideas with them as well, but those people aren't dying off as fast as the French slaves in Haiti. So they can develop their own traditions as well. But when the Haitian Revolution occurs, there's a lot of white plantation owners from Haiti who actually get on ships with their slaves and come to New Orleans for protection. So then they start plantations there, but they're infusing their slaves into the already New Orleans slave culture, and that kind of reinforces that idea of voodoo and that has its roots back to West Africa and Benin. And then you get Marie Laveau. The stories of Marie Laveau. So she was a woman she was mixed race. They're not sure if there were one or two Marie Laveaus, if we're talking about a mother-daughter group. Possibly even the grandmother might have had some, been known. But Marie Laveau was the voodoo priestess for New Orleans. And one of the things that she was able to do was control white society. She could bend them to her will, and she does that because she's a hairdresser, and she learns people's stories.
She could blackmail them.
And that's exactly what she could do. She could blackmail them. She also was pretty good at. People truthfully thought that she was being possessed by the spirits, which was not a bad thing in voodoo. That's a good thing in voodoo.
Didn't they often believe that an ancestor who had passed, they were still with you, just need to visit their new home?
Yeah. There is some degree of ancestor worship in all of that. I can't think of the name of the square in New Orleans where they would have voodoo on Sunday afternoons. But see, still some of these people were, and she was Catholic. Marie Laveau was. She was part of the Catholic Church.
That's shocking, yeah.
Yeah, but again, she had this other life.
Other practice.
Practice, these other beliefs.
So I think, Kaleb, you want to tell us, I think you've been to that place, right?
I have, actually. I visited New Orleans back in 2017. Love that town, want to move there one day. Point being, I visited Marie Laveau's grave. It's the coolest thing ever, because in New Orleans, they don't have buried graves. They're tombs because of the water level. Coffins would burst out of the ground when it got wet, when it rained, because the water level was so low. Because of this, on her tomb, I believe, you may know Ben and I, but the actual ritual was, if I can find it, it was something along the line of draw an X on her tomb, shout your wish aloud, leave something for her, walk in a circle 3 times, then leave, and once it gets completed, come back, cross out circle. I'm not
sure.
I think it was circle your X, and if it doesn't come true, if you take something, you could be cursed.
Oh wow!
It was the coolest thing ever because it really I normally hate graveyards. I love that place because it's such. The way they do it is it puts, even though they're dead, it doesn't mean they're gone. They're still with the people around them.
It's more of a celebration of life.
Exactly. That's why
in some ways those.
I want to have a wake, not a funeral. I want my life to be celebrated, not we're gathered here today. I want something fun, something that represented how I lived.
Mm-hmm.
And those so they're like the tombs are like boxes, like concrete cement boxes
above the ground.
Above the ground. There's usually there's a door in the top. You can put two bodies actually. If there's 2 slots, you could put 2 coffins in there. It's a year and a day. You put a body in there, and it has to be there for a year and a day. By a year and a day, it's nothing but bones because of the weather and everything down there. And then what they would do is push the bones off the back end of those tables or slots and down into the bottom of the tomb. So you could have 50 people buried in one of those things. She's not there alone. I believe there are some of her other relatives are there. I may be wrong, but I think that there are some other people there.
Bit of trivia, that graveyard. I also visit Nicolas Cage's tomb. He had one built. It is a white pyramid, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Going back to Marie, you can tell how when people think of New Orleans, they think of Marie Laveau, and you can tell how popular she is because she was she was on American Horror Story as one of the main characters in the series Coven. So you could tell just how popular she was.
And like with everything, you know, when pop culture gets a hold of it, it kind of changes.
We'll talk about it later.
So anyway, and Congo Square is where they would have their voodoo rituals. There's a story about this guy. He was I can't remember. I think he was from a wealthy family, and he was going to be put on trial, and she said that she could get him off, and I can't remember exactly what she did, but she did get him off, and so, you know, that was how she used her power, because then his father owed her something. And so that was...
She used politics as well, I guess.
She used politics and,
manipulation and...
And supposedly, you know, there was a time when the police were coming to Congo Square, and she basically gained control over them. Not that they were zombies, but she basically took their free will during that time period so that they couldn't beat up on the people in the Congo Square.
Are there any instances of her, even if it's a myth, that she actually had zombies?
No, I haven't found any of that. But I'm sure that, you know, as a priestess, she would have probably had that power if she had wanted
to create like back in Haiti, like we talked about that kind of zombie.
Yes, that would have been what it was, and it would probably been more of a scare tactic than anything. But I don't, in the books that I've read about her, I've never come across that. But, you know, again, how does that idea of zombie is in New Orleans? So that came with the voodoo that kind of grew there.
So I think we're getting in a line now. So you have this the difference between slavery in Haiti and America, of course, and then you see, as we said, the voodoo creation and the zombie example that you showed in Haiti, that it moved to New Orleans in the United States. So what happens after that?
What happens after that is So voodoo is still suppressed in Haiti, and it is until I think it's the 1950s or the 1960s when a voodoo priest by the name of Papa Doc, D-O-C. That's he actually becomes the ruler of Haiti, and he brings it back out from under the hidden part and celebrates it more. And then I think it's in 2003, it becomes an official religion of Haiti.
Voodoo?
Voodoo does,
wow.
Yes. Just so you, 2003, it becomes an official religion.
And it's still there today, I will assume.
Yes. So that's just a little side thing. Going back to what you were saying, so Haiti, despite getting its freedom and independence early on, it kept having problems with money, with being taken seriously. So the United States, in all of its infinite wisdom, it becomes a it starts to come onto the world scene with the Spanish-American War in 1898. And it starts to become concerned with Haiti and, what's going on, because it's kind of in our back door, just like Cuba was or is. In 1914, we invade. Anybody want to know why? Anybody take a guess what else happens in 1914?
That is World War I.
Yes. So the United States becomes concerned that Germany has its eye on Haiti. And so we invade.
What's more logical to do?
Naturally.
And we're there until the 30s. And what's important about that is that there are two two people. The first is Zora Neale Hurston. She is African American, descendant of slaves from Florida. She becomes educated, and she's very interested in anthropology as well, sociology, and she starts to write down a lot of the slave stories from Florida. But as she gets more and more interested in that, she gets interested in what's going on in Haiti. And she actually goes to Haiti. She writes a book. She actually goes to Haiti, and and I think it's because of the color of her skin, she is actually brought into some of the kind of those hidden ceremonies and that hidden part of voodoo. And she actually runs into a woman who supposedly was zombified.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then there's another guy. His name is William Seabrook, white male. He's got some interesting things going on with him, too. And he writes a book about Haiti.
It's called The Magic Island.
It's called The Magic Island. And in there is a story called Dead Men Working in the Cane Fields. And this is the story where this Beaucourt, he gets these guys, makes them seem like they're dead, pulls them back out of their graves, and he sends them to work in the cane fields, and he collects their salary.
You know what that reminds me of? So in the Orthodox Greek religion, I think when you become a monk, they do exactly the same thing. They put you in a coffin. You given a rebirth, and they give you a new name.
Oh yeah.
So that kind of reminds me of the same thing.
But they're not mindless. They haven't lost their free will.
It's the process, I think.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is that voodoo eventually became worldwide that it kind of became like people who are like non-religious still believed in it. Like people in America who think four-leaf clovers are lucky or other like a horseshoe. People who didn't exactly follow the religion, but they still believed in it. They still thought it worked.
It's a tradition.
Well, I think again, I think that if you were a slave owner, you're always scared of slaves revolting. But if you encounter someone like Marie Laveau, who all these stories, myths, ideas come about her.
Urban legend.
Yeah, and I think part of it is we romanticize it. Not back then. I think back then they could truly be scared of what she was doing.
It's the pop culture fact that's coming in.
Yeah, that's the this pop culture fact starts with William Seabrook. When his book is published, there is a play written, and then soon right after that is White Zombie. It's the first zombie movie that is ever made, and it's in the 30s.
So let's back up here. So the voodoo, it's the mother of zombies.
Yes.
That's where we're getting zombies. The true thing of zombies is that they coming from voodoo.
Right.
So I guess you said that now we're getting into the pop culture now. So you have this still in America now, in New Orleans and the South.
Yes.
But you also still have it in Haiti.
Yes.
So I guess what you just said, it's that everything when it comes to pop culture starts with this author.
With William Seabrook, right. Because Seabrook, Zora Neale Hurston's work isn't really picked up and examined until after her death. So it would be the 60s on. Seabrook was a well-known travel writer, so people bought his stuff. And I, like I said, people became kind of intrigued with it. American soldiers came back from Haiti, and they were telling stories as well that kind of went with Seabrook's ideas. So it's becoming a little bit more known in the United States. So I would say Marie Laveau to some extent, because Marie Laveau, I mean, she's the 1800s. Now Seabrook's the I think it's the late 20s that he's published.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, sometimes there are newspaper articles about Marie Laveau, so she's getting out
That
there.
attention, yeah.
I mean, she's not. It's not like everybody knew who she was, but there were.
She's getting there because of these stories that are coming out.
Yeah. But I think Seabrook and his ideas really start entering more into a wider culture. And then, like I said, Hollywood picks it up with White Zombie.
Yeah. Before we move on to the pop culture aspect, I think Kris has some information about zombies in other cultures, right?
Yeah. They don't. Some of them do represent like zombies, but like they have key differences. Like in China, they have the Chang Shi, which is Chinese for stiff corpse, combines the attributes of the zombie and the vampire. Chang Shi are often people who have been victims of suicide or murder. The Chang Shi can look more or less normal if recently dead, or their bodies can have mold and decaying flesh on them, like the zombies we know.
Yeah.
The Chinese zombie moves by hopping, which I think is kind of funny. Just see a bunch of like a Walking Dead style zombies just hopping around. In Romania, there's the Strigoi is
Strigoi.
Strigoi or something.
Yep,
Yeah.
Strugoi.
yeah. That also includes many traits of the vampire.
Yeah.
They drink
do.
blood and can transform into animals.
Yeah.
And then, Syria, they found a bunch of archaeologists found a bunch of sites. They date, I don't think it's 10,000 years old, but someone bashed the skulls in and completely removed them from the rest of their bodies because they were afraid that they might reanimate.
Yeah.
Same thing in Greece. They found a bunch of sites that they pinned down the bodies with rots and other heavy objects so that they'd be prevented from rising up.
Evan, are you a zombie?
I don't think so.
He might be.
So just to make it clear, though, the difference between vampires and zombies are that vampires have free will.
Yeah.
And that is true. Yeah.
And zombies do not.
It was just similar to it.
Yeah,
so
it is.
I thought I would mention it.
It is because definitely. I mean, and if Heather were here, she would go more into that aspect of it.
And also, before Seabrook did his Magic Island, the word zombie was first entered into the English language in 1819 when the poet Robert Southey wrote History of Brazil.
Oh, interesting. There's another guy. I think his first name is Luciano, but I can't remember what his last name is. And he writes an article for the Atlantic. You know, the magazine The Atlantic. Has been around that long, and in there it's something countryside, dead in the country. It's a story that's, some people say, brought the word zombie to the United States as well. But anyway, so the word was there, but I don't think it really came into pop culture until
It wasn't mainstream.
Seabrook,
Yeah.
probably Seabrook
Yeah.
introduced it.
Yeah.
So
And he too, that dead man working in the cane field story that is in the Magic Island. I mean, he says that he had this Haitian guy take him, and he too saw these zombies. Now, just so you know, these guys' bodies did not decay because they're not dead. They're just were put into that state by being buried alive.
They're not like the typical pop culture zombie.
No, and they don't eat brains.
What did they look like? Was there any descriptions, like dead
Just
eyes?
Yeah, like
pale?
there's nothing. Yeah.
we'll get into that because that goes into the pop
But
into the
the
pop
other
culture.
thing, the other part of this was, and I'm pretty sure this is the end of Dead Men Working in the Cane Fields, salt. If you want to break the spell, you have them eat salt, and what that did then is pulled the body back to the grave, and that was the end of their life.
Oh wow!
So they're just dead.
They're
Let's
just
give them
dead.
some salt.
But the woman that Zora Neale Hurston met, she was recovering, And then later on, Wade Davis in the 80s, he meets a guy who supposedly has been zombified, and he recovers. There's still some, they're not completely all there, but they become self-aware again.
Do they explain how they got back to being normal?
Well,
or?
in Wade Davis's book, The Serpent and the Rainbow, which was made into a movie that's a little bit like the book, but not as scholarly, if you want to call it that. There is a guy, his name is Clarice Nerisse, I believe.
Well,
anyway, he disappears. He had several siblings. He disappears. Nobody knows what happened to him. They thought he was dead. Oh, I know. He goes to the hospital. Something supposedly was wrong with him. He goes to the hospital. Supposedly he dies. And there was a land dispute, which is part of the problem he was having with his siblings. Anyway, something goes wrong with him. He goes to the hospital. He dies. They bury him. Then about 15 years later, he shows up in the market of the town where he supposedly lived. And what had happened was his brother had basically set it up so that this Bokur could zombify him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he took him off to work, and then the guy died. And when the Bokur dies, that supposedly breaks the spell.
With the zombie dying, or just them back to normal?
No, he started to come back to normal. He started to regain his self-awareness. So 15 years later, he shows up, and his sister takes one look at him and is just like, not happy at all, because evidently she must have been in part of the plot, because they were after his land, his part of the land, I guess.
To me, it sounds like a kind of very strong hypnotism. That's what it gets down to.
But they are using something. I mean, Wade Davis and those pharmaceutical companies were onto something. They were using whether it was coming from the puffer fish. Wade Davis talks a little bit about some of the plants down there. If it's a combination of that stuff, who knows?
There are a lot of poisons that instead of killing, they just straight up paralyze.
Yeah, they do something to your mind.
There's a snail in that, I think that area, the Caribbean area, that its poison can paralyze like 50 men with one sting.
Yeah.
So something along those lines wouldn't be entirely out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
So it was something that they took in order to get into that stage.
There's several snakes too, probably, that do that too.
Yeah. So they and I think that part of it too is, again, the being buried alive,
which changes a lot. It's a
a
lot of psychology and the mind.
Yes, it is.
That's what's all more about.
It is.
Claustrophobic, I say no.
but so we know this, or this has kind of come through the work that Hurston did, the work that Seabrook did, definitely the work that Davis did, because Davis is really the first true scholar.
That brings it in.
Yeah, although Zora Neale Hurston was a scholar in her own right, but she was never really acknowledged because she had I think she ended up with a master's degree, but she never had like the other credentials to back her up. And then over time people questioned the validity of her work and stuff like that. But after Davis, people went back to some of her work to look at it.
So let's stop here, because we kind of went into the history, and we would like to thank WUPI 92.1 FM for hosting our podcast, and we wanted to let you know that WUPI is now available on TuneIn, and we also highly encourage you to like their page on Facebook and Instagram. Also, our podcasts are now available on SoundCloud, and you can find us by searching the word History Hour Podcast. All right, and we're right back. So we went through the history, and we kind of saw the origins of what we call the zombies. So let's try to touch on the pop culture now. Let's try to see how zombies evolve, because we do have, like, as you said, the white zombies, I think, was the first instance that we see
Yeah.
those kind of
Yes.
creatures in our pop
In
culture?
1935, 32. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, in
It's the
1932.
first. It's the first film that Bela Lugosi ever made. If you don't know who Bela Lugosi is, then you need to go and start watching some old black and white. He was like one of the original scary guys. He, along with Boris Karloff,
So
who made Frankenstein.
Quite the name.
So let's start by describing that, and then we'll try to use some of our most recent examples of zombies, like the Michael Jackson,
Walking Dead.
the Walking Dead today, and then you have all these crazy movies that you see an evolution of how we perceive
Yeah.
those creatures. So let's start with the white zombie.
So what you want to know, what you want to realize is that, and this is going to ruin your movie watching experience forever, is that almost every movie has some kind of cultural message to it. So White Zombie was about American, what do I want to call it? Imperialism. Each of the
That
characters,
makes sense.
yeah, each of the characters represents some aspect of American imperialism.
Well, that was during the Great Depression too, so that.
Yeah, that's part of it. But it's oppression. I mean, it's a great movie. You can get it on YouTube. I believe you can watch it for free because I think the copyright of it is gone. And
Isn't it like 50 years for the copyright or something?
I think it's
Something like that?
70.
Is it 70?
For written, at least. I don't know what it is for movies. But anyway, so the zombie maker in this one is Bela Lugosi. So the zombie maker is white. And he's making all of his, he's turning all of his, like all the people in society that have wronged him into zombies. And then this guy comes to him. This guy sees this woman and her husband who are honeymooning in Haiti, because that's where you want to go for a honeymoon. Well, actually,
Definitely.
I shouldn't say they're honeymooning, because the husband has a job with a bank, and so they're down there because of the bank. But anyway, so the guy sees her, he wants her. She won't leave her husband, so he gets the zombie maker to make her into a zombie. And I'm not going to say anything more about that. But yeah, there's a lot of imperialism, undertones of imperialism in it.
So the important thing I think we should mention from this first instance of a zombie movie is that zombies are actually humans under influence.
Yeah, again, he's done something to them to take away their free will.
It's nothing like a monster or something.
Nothing like a monster.
It's a normal human.
It's a normal human, right? And it's voodoo. I mean, they talk about the voodoo. They don't go into a whole lot of detail with it, but it's definitely the voodoo.
Absolutely,
practices.
yeah.
I mean, that being said, when did it turn into mindless zombies going?
Well,
mindless flesh-eating creatures.
You're too
hold on.
fast, Kris.
Am I?
You
Hold
way
on.
too
I
fast.
want to mention two more movies. One is I Walked with a Zombie, which is a really good movie. It's made in the 40s. And that is about I don't know if the guy's a plantation owner. He's white. He lives in Haiti. He's wealthy.
Same motivo.
His wife has turned into a zombie.
Okay.
And she is
Sequel
drawn.
or something?
She is drawn
Probably.
to the voodoo, like the ceremonies that they have. So that's there's like what made her into this. So it's all the perspective. They hire a nurse to watch her, and so it's all from the perspective of that nurse. And so you're wondering who turned her into the zombie. Was it the husband? Was it the?
I gotta watch that movie.
Was it the
Sounds
the?
interesting.
Was it the descendants of the slaves who are practicing the voodoo who turned her? So anyway, yes, it's a great
First
movie.
whodunit.
And then there's a comedy, and it's pretty racist actually. It's called King of the Zombies.
It is the 30s.
Yeah, and it's remade later on where the bad guys are actually Nazis. So maybe this is the first Nazi
I
zombie
was about
movie.
to say, when was it remade?
But I can't remember the name of the actor, African American, but he, it's every single stereotype of African American that they had back then is in that movie to get laughs. So it's
makes
kind of a
sense.
comedy. Yeah. So it's worth watching just to take. Now I would say there are the closest undertones to that are the bad guys or the Nazis. But
So I guess what we have to take from these examples is the nature of the zombie, which is a real human
yeah.
that is under some influence
Yeah.
from those shamans, that
Yeah,
cultural
yeah.
influence that's
Yeah.
coming to them.
Yeah.
So when did it change? Because
So just two more plugs for
Okay,
two more
okay.
two more other movies.
We're
if
being a little bit impatient.
no, two more movies that you should really watch. The one is Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is a Cold
Oh yes,
War film.
I've
Oh,
heard
yes.
that one.
So are they zombies? Let's ask that. They lose their free will once the aliens take
I was
over.
supposed to say they don't call them zombies. I
No,
don't think.
no,
do
they don't call them at all. But if we're defining them as the lack of free will, and the other one is what was that Will Smith movie?
I Am Legend.
Yes, I Am
That
Legend.
is a really good movie.
Oh,
Okay,
yes.
So those in the book, I believe they're more zombie than vampire.
Well, they're not vampires in the movie.
Well, I mean, they
also.
die in the
Well-
sunlight, though.
Well, let me
They-
tell you this: in the first I Am Legend was
both.
made back in the 50s with
I didn't even know that there was a first
Yeah,
one.
there's the
I
first
didn't know it was remade.
yeah, it was Vincent Price.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And they're kind of more vampire, but they kind of have a little bit of free will there. So anyway, they're kind of up in the air. Okay, so flesh eaters. When did they become flesh eaters? Night of the Living Dead.
Romero's.
Yes.
So that's the
Yeah.
first.
That's the first.
That's the first instance.
Yes.
So So how did that came to be? Do we know? Do
Scare
we
factor?
even know?
And also,
Well-
to add to that, was there any backlash to it? Be like, oh, these are not real zombies. Why are they?
No, nothing like that. Because he doesn't call them zombies in that movie. I can't remember what he calls them. Ghouls. Ghouls is what he calls them. There's another world example. A ghoul. I'm not, because a ghoul is. Although a ghoul kind of
Ghouls
has.
kind of have free will, though.
Yeah, they do have free will.
Depending on the ghoul.
But they're flesh eaters, aren't they?
Yeah, usually.
Yeah. Anyway, so I don't think, from what I've read, and again, I encourage people to go out and look at more of Romero's stuff. The interviews, there's some great interviews on YouTube and everything. I think he was just going out to make a movie. And this is...
And then becomes like one of the cornerstones of zombie movie culture.
Yeah, well, and it didn't do well in the United States. When it first came out, it went to Great Britain after the United States. It did well in Great Britain, and then it came back here, and kind of took off. That is a movie. The cultural undertones.
Yeah.
The cultural undertones of that movie, or the messages of that movie, and I don't think Romero was trying to really say this, or so he would say, but the things that are in that movie are it's the Cold War, so it's that emergency broadcasting system. That plays a big role in it. They don't know where how these people turned into flesh eaters, but they know that they have to contain them. There's some racism in it because the main character is actually African American, and he gets caught up in a farmhouse with whites, particularly this one guy who's very racist. So there's also some things about Vietnam. The search and destroy was kind of later becomes the cornerstone of Vietnam, and having the body count. It doesn't matter if you knew whether they were the enemy or not, as long as you had a body count. that's how they measured success. And so they do those kinds of things in that movie. So it's definitely a reflection of things that are going on in the 60s.
But they are the flesh eaters. The
But they are flesh. They're brain eaters.
Yes. How about their appearance, though? Does the appearance change, or they're still humans?
They still look human, but they are glassy-eyed, and they definitely lack free will because the only thing that's driving them is brains.
Mm-hmm.
Food.
So they just
Food.
trying to get into the human brains. That's like
Yeah.
their...
Well, maybe it's flesh anyway. Yeah.
Well,
They try to eat a human. That's
They're trying to
it
eat
depends
the human.
on the zombie, whether it's brain or the whole flesh.
Yeah, there's different kinds of them,
I
too.
think maybe brains comes with a different Romero film.
Brains just like the dessert, the treat.
True.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
But the main theme is
The main course is the body.
Yes.
Yeah, they're trying to eat the body.
So we move from a that's a cultural shock to be honest,
Like
because
hypnotism to
exactly
undead flesh
and
eaters.
I
Well, that's why I
really
asked.
caution the use of the word hypnotism because they're. I mean, yeah, you're right. Hypnotism can take away somebody's free will, but I think in the voodoo religion, there is something that they're actually ingesting.
Either
Yes.
whether it's the pufferfish or
What?
well,
yeah.
we should call them to the I guess we can give them a name, the manipulator zombies and the real zombies or something like that.
But I mean, I'm sure there are movies where people hypnotize people and got them to do things that they didn't want to do. I know I've seen a movie where
there's
they've
many
hypnotized
movies.
Like
people and
thousands.
caused them to commit murder.
Yes,
so are
yes.
those people zombies? I mean,
No,
they've lost their free will. If that is the one thing that voodoo zombies have in common with Walking Dead zombies.
It's the freedom.
It's
It's the
the-
free will.
the
Yes,
loss
yes.
of free will.
co-walkers. But
So I guess the free will aspect is what determines somebody to be a zombie.
In my book, anyway, that's
And I think that's what it is. So we have the humans, that they have they don't have a free will, that they look human. Then you move into this one instance.
yeah. And so Romero's work, particularly in that they determined that it was something in the sky, if it was some kind of fallout that caused the people to become zombies.
like a pathogen or
No, it was a radiation.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember,
Nuclear
this is
fallout?
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is Cold War stuff.
Which make a lot of sense.
And
yeah.
then his next one, it's not Night of the Living Dead. It's shoot, what can I think of it? It's the green. It's yeah. It. So with Romero, it stops being voodoo connected
It's been something else.
and starts
yeah.
being something else. Whether it's a radioactive
a
fallout.
sickness or something like
something-
that.
yes.
Like the I am
Legend.
legend starts with a sickness.
Yes.
A
yes,
virus.
Yes.
That turns you like that. And I think that's when it gets into the modern kind
Dawn of the
zombie.
Dead?
Dawn of the Dead.
Is that what you're thinking of?
Or is it Day of the Dead? I can't keep them straight.
Dawn of the Dead was in 1978, and then Day of the Dead is in 1985.
Yes, and then there's
Land of the Dead, which
Land
is in
of the Dead.
2005.
So we're losing the voodoo aspect and it comes
you're
into
losing the voodoo.
sick-
Way,
Sickness.
yeah, way.
yeah. It changes completely.
Yeah.
If I had to guess why, probably like scare factor, because there's a difference between a flesh-eating almost monster versus someone who just isn't in control.
And I think during the Cold War, it might make more sense because that's when our culture was more shocked when it came to those biological weapons.
That's
Shock
right,
factor.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
There's also differences between those flesh-eating zombies, like whether they run or they walk, or whether
yeah,
they're
well,
Exactly.
They
whether
that's-
they're affected by the a nuclear fallout, or whether they're bitten, or whether they're whatever.
And that's a great
There's the-
point.
Disease, you have to die.
the shambling. Let's see. Land of the Dead is. Land of the Dead is 2005. So, I can't remember. There's one that's not a Romero film.
28 days later.
No, that happens in that I'm pretty sure is in a. I don't think it's a Romero film. No, it's not. It's funny. It's definitely an 80s film.
Is it the one where they have like a pet zombie or whatever?
Yeah.
Or is that the
green,
Romero film?
It's a green. It's toxic waste, and it gets dumped into the.
And it,
and then it turns
never mind.
everybody into
I see. Yeah. So it's again you get something still that goes back to voodoo.
Right.
That something causes you to happen.
And that movie really has no cultural message or undertones to it other than the 80s was bad hair.
Crazy time.
When I was a teenager. I mean, the closest thing would be the toxic waste.
Yes.
You know, we're hurting our environment. But there's two of Romero's films talk about. One of them, it takes place, it's been remade recently, and the remake of it has Ving Rhames in it. You know, that actor, he's a big guy. Anyway, the most of it takes place in a shopping mall.
Mm-hmm.
So that film and Land of the Dead are all about, well, that film is about consumerism, and I can't remember if it's Day or Dawn of the Dead. But then Land of the Dead is about social class, because all of the wealthy people were able to survive by holing up in this big kind of like the luxury apartment building that had a shopping mall and food and everything in the bottom. And then everyday people are kind of outside of the walls. And then there's this group that makes their money by going out into the hinterworld and getting supplies and stuff and having to deal with the zombies. But those zombies start to become self-aware. So he adds a little twist.
Wouldn't that mean that they're not zombies anymore?
Well, that's the question. I mean, they're still you know. So again, we're teasing. You're teasing it out a little bit here.
And then there's zombies like World War Z, where they just like
Yes.
use themselves as ladders and like.
So I'm not sure which in I Am Legend. Those are more with Will Smith.
They had a sickness.
It was
they
more
turned them
vampires.
like
They're
that.
more vampires, right? So
Because they looked like they actually had self-awareness. Like
yes,
I can't really
yes.
say the end just in case of spoilers, but like, especially at the end, it was.
They
a
could
little bit-
communicate and they did have a feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're more like vampires that look like zombies.
Yeah. And so I'm not sure which movie comes first in terms of them being fast. If it's 28 Days Later or
I don't ever remember them being fast. I always remember them.
It
Those
was 85, right? Was it the 85 one?
none of Romero's films I don't think had fast ones.
I thought he changed the style of it. I thought he went from being the slow, methodical.
Well, those are early movies that come in on now. They're developing. Their zombies in the current movies are developing, and they even have a consciousness.
Well, I think in the 90s is maybe when they start to get fast. Which comes first? 28 Days Later or World War Z?
World War Z was in 2013, and then 28 Days Later
was before
like
that.
2002 or something.
Yeah. So to me, that's the film in my mind. But I'm not an expert. That's why we should have had Heather. I'm not the expert on the films, but in my mind, it's 28 Days Later.
I think the reason why they changed it is because like it feels like it's scarier. It's like, oh, with walking zombies, it's like, oh, I can get away from them kind of easily.
Yeah.
But with the running ones, it's like, oh no, it's going to be much harder to.
For the heroes to survive.
Yeah.
And the story plot.
And it also changes then to a disease or a parasite.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is 28 Days Later, I think.
Yeah.
And
right.
then Walking
Right.
Dead is one of them
And
too.
then, The Walking Dead. And then I want to mention again Thriller by Michael Jackson. That also brings the pop
Yeah, that
culture in
brings
there
up-
with the
that
zombies.
does.
that
There's
come-
also a werewolf in there, isn't he?
Yeah, but the zombie part is when they come out of the ground, they're
Ground,
green and their
and
eyes
the
and
whole
stuff.
And they
thing
do the
is
famous
for-
dance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
yeah.
dance and...
I can remember when that was first
Was that very
aired.
controversial? The
It was
music?
Well,
controversial
I remember-
because of the length.
Well, because what I remember of it is my friend had cable TV. I didn't. So this was so I went to high school 80 to 84. So This would have been when does that come out? 81, 82?
I thought it was like 84, 85.
Maybe it's 84. It's got to be 84 because I graduated in 84.
No, I guess it's 84.
Yeah, and I went to
It's
college.
actually 82.
Oh, it's 82.
Sorry, 82 then.
So anyway, what I remember is going to her house to watch MTV because MTV was brand new, and I remember the build up to that was huge. And they were like, we're gonna first air this at midnight because it might be too scary for children.
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff. I remember that really well. And to tell you the truth, I can't remember if I was over at her house and we stayed up to midnight to watch it. I can't remember it, but...
Were you guys scared when you first saw it?
I mean, it was... At that point... let me say this. At that point in my life, just seeing anything that had to do with a horror movie, like a commercial or anything, would have given me nightmares. I never watched horror movies.
It was a part of the culture, to be honest,
still don't.
back then. Now it's in our everyday...
Well, and I think, once you live and you face life, horror movies aren't scary anymore.
Yes.
Well, it's also becoming the norm too. And there's like a lot more like gore and blood and stuff.
Well, but
and
the special effects now make it so much more than what I mean.
So much worse.
I think we're getting away from the topic.
You have to.
I think we have been off the topic for a while now.
So anyway, I think that 28 days later, I could be wrong, but in my mind, that's the one where they start being kind of fast. And
did you know that they had to like block off the exit, like off the streets, like so that it seems like there's like it's like empty and stuff when he was like walking down the street?
Yeah.
They had to like block off the highways, and like people were mad.
I would imagine.
So what I get as an outsider listening to your guys' stories, there is a huge evolution and a huge change when it comes to the zombie
Definitely
development, and I think the discretion of those, it's mostly to the directors of the movies, that they're basing different pieces together and they create something else that actually affects the pop culture of our nation.
As like a drama nerd, like a big part of stories are tension. So if you have these slow monsters who are coming at you, that doesn't create as much tension as things that are sprinting at you, angry and growly. That creates a whole other part of your story.
I think The Walking Dead, the tension. I mean, they're kind of.
I was supposed to say The Walking Dead. They're walking.
But the tension with them comes when they come in a horde.
Yeah, or if they like surprise the heroes or something.
Yeah,
like
they're just unlimited and they're just coming in.
While we're off topic, I have been watching The Walking Dead all the way through, and
I'm on season 7. I think.
And my question is, they've been out there for 10 years now, and by this time I would think all of the if there's new zombies, where are they coming from? And B, the zombies that are there, shouldn't they be pretty well decayed by now?
Well, actually, it's kind of funny because they have been visibly decaying over these years too.
But by now they shouldn't even be walking.
Yeah.
They should just be dead.
Tendon snapping, muscles no longer working.
Yeah,
you're lucky they're even kind of decaying a little bit because they could just go on with this for years. You're lucky they're just decaying a little bit.
As long as they're making money. So we're reaching a limit here for our podcast. So
don't worry about it.
Gone over?
Yes, but it's okay. We can still wrap it up.
I think we're 9 minutes over.
One more thing before we go then.
It's all yours, Kim.
Okay, so again, if you're watching 28 Days and all these other zombie things, think about what are the underlying messages. Because The Walking Dead is really about what makes us civilized, is what it's really about.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But I have to say probably my favorite zombie TV show is Z Nation.
Oh yes, I've
heard about it.
Oh,
yes.
Because they're making fun of every zombie thing that was. I mean, it's hokey, but man, if you know your zombie stuff, there's a lot of humor.
Makes sense there. Yes.
In Z Nation.
So great! I think it was a great discussion, and we started off with something simple and something well understood, which is the simple concept of a zombie that comes from a cultural tradition to something that just expanded and it keeps expanding.
Actually, I got the total number of like what the zombie product has made over the years. So combined with all the movies and TV shows and all that, today it is nearly a $6 billion industry.
$6 billion. This is
5 of which is The Walking Dead.
this is
Yeah, pretty much.
this is a lot, and it shows it. It's like one word, 1,000 images, and that's what we get from this pop culture change. That things change affect our culture when it comes to.
I was going to say, I think the change in zombies in movies kind of represented our change in culture, too.
Absolutely, and in every movie it has that. But it's really important, especially when it comes to the history of it, to understand where it started from and where it is now.
Yeah.
When you see those differences.
And if you don't think zombies are real, then I urge you to there's a great TED Talk. I can't remember the guy's name, but just type in zombie wasp and parasite, and he talks all about the bugs that take over other bugs'
I've read about it.
Those are creepy.
And then, unfortunately,
fungus
the other thing you want to do is look at do some research on bath salts and crocodile, and that's spelled Krokidile.
Crocodile?
It's
What's
a
that?
drug,
It's the drugs,
and
yeah.
it eats you from the inside out.
Yep, and I've also watched a documentary about that, and they actually call it the zombie drug.
And right, because it takes away your free will.
Yep.
Because you're so out of your mind.
So even you believe on it or not, there's a
Yeah.
lot of evidence out there that might show things that you don't expect.
Maybe not like the
sometimes.
pop culture kind, but maybe a different form of it.
Which kind of proves the point that this might have been actually real, even if you believe in it. So
And if you want to know more, you can take my class.
absolutely.
It's
so
called Zombies
Yeah,
Eat
take her
America.
classes. Take all of her classes.
so just to make to make some of that. So what is your class focusing on? Just as a closing remark.
Everything that we've talked about today just touches the highlights of the class.
Great.
Yep.
I think it's.
So
I think
slavery, colonialism, imperialism, and then pop culture, what those films reflect, and how the zombies change over
I
time.
think we might have to take that, guys.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, that's all for today's episode of the History Hour. Thanks for listening, and thank you to Kim Sebold for joining us today and sharing her ideas and knowledge about the history of the zombies in American culture. Also, for previous or future episodes of the History Hour podcast, make sure you search History Hour podcast in SoundCloud. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.